Michael is, I've known Michael for several years. He is the Director of Industry Strategy and Marketing at Adobe, and globally, he focuses on retail, travel, and CPG. And he gave a dynamite session at the Adobe Summit, and a commercial plug here. Go to the Adobe Summit next year in Vegas. It was tremendous. Michael, over to you.
Okay, so while I'm getting teed up here, I'm Michael Klein, and I'm going to talk about transformation and why do I have the right to talk about digital transformation. I've been at Adobe since 2009 when we acquired Omniture, the leading web analytics solution, but before that, I spent 20 years as a senior marketer and merchandiser for a variety of brands like Williams-Sonoma, Wine.com, the Louis Vuitton Group. So I started on the shop floor and went through catalog and corporate, and then got to the .com space. So I've pretty much seen it all going back for the last 30 years, believe it or not. So retail has been transforming. It has needed to transform for the better part of the last 2 decades, for the past 20 years, because we think about the ultimate disruptor in retail, and that is, of course, Amazon. And when we think about the disruption of what's happening in retail, our buddy Jeff Perriton over at the Connors Group talked about the idea that if retailers don't start to embrace the very technology that is challenging their business, they could certainly find themselves with the likes of the Mervyns, the Circuit Cities, the Borders, et cetera. And it was only a few years ago, I think yesterday in one of the keynotes, our buddy Mark Andreessen with the VC group that we have here, I'm sure his name comes up on a semi-regular basis, but he actually made the bold statement in 2013 that said that the physical brick and mortar store will eventually go away. And I'm here to tell you today that that will never happen. The data that we have, the information, the journey that consumers are going on requires the fact that the brick and mortar store is really still very healthy in some ways, but it's what do we do to transform that experience as we go through the journey. And we recognize that 90% of retail is still taking place in that physical brick and mortar store. But here's the conundrum. The conundrum is that that 90% of sales is only growing at single-digit rates year over year, if you're lucky. That means that you're growing your business around 3, 4, 5%, if you're lucky, where, when we know the data, that e-commerce is exploding. It's exploding across the globe. So every year, the Adobe Digital Index team produces, and that's because of our access to huge amounts of data due to the Adobe Analytics platform, we're able to measure 7.5 of every 10 cents that goes through the Internet Retailer 500 across the globe. And when you see the growth in areas like China, up to over 150 billion in the months of November and December going through e-commerce, 13% increase here in North America for November, December, and huge lifts across Europe as well. And if we think about, and what I'm going to talk about when we think about the bridge between the physical and the digital world and how mobile is key to that, we also see that there's this interesting shift, because a couple of years ago, we were talking a lot about tablets and what that meant to the retail space. And that tablets, 8 to 12 p.m., second screen viewing, conversion rates, viewing, all of that exploding, same to almost identical to the desktop. But now we're starting to see this other shift happening in 2015, going in 2016, where actually smartphone is now overtaking the tablet from a commerce perspective because of a variety of reasons. And I'll talk a little bit about this, but one of them is actually Apple. So iPhone 6 was introduced in 2014, at the end in September of 14, and they didn't have a full holiday season, but we certainly saw some interesting shifts in 2015 because now we have a bigger form factor with the Samsung large format phones, the iPhone 6 Plus. These form factors are becoming more and more conducive to shopping, to commerce, whether you want to call it a tablet, a phablet, a phone. All these devices are becoming extremely important to the journey of that consumer. And for the first time ever, Thanksgiving of 2015, mobile surpassed desktop when it came to store traffic and visits. And not only that, for those 2-month periods, mobile contributed 45% of the visits and 25% of the revenue. So huge opportunity as we think about this. And then this is what's going on when I think about entrepreneurship and innovation. These are the things that are happening. These, the beacons, RFID, wish list, seamless shopping across different touch points is what is being discussed by the likes of a Scott Emmons, who is the head of innovation for stores over at Neiman Marcus, who we've been working with quite closely. And some of the things that they're trying to do to create the brilliant basics to deliver experiences that consumers expect in that physical brick and mortar store. Think about the idea that Amazon, the #1 disruptor, is now in the physical brick and mortar space. Okay, are you all aware that Amazon now has stores? So they opened their first store in Seattle. They already announced store #2 in San Diego. You think about Warby Parker, started in 2010 as a disruptor to the eyeglass industry, and now they are in physical stores across the country. I think they have at least a dozen stores in Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and others. ModCloth, they already have a store here in San Francisco. They are already talking about how they expand those stores out. So the idea of being able to, and this is consumer expectation, #1 expectation, buy a product online, return it to a store. That is one of the most compelling reasons why a consumer chooses to interact or patronize a particular retail brand. So this is the bridge. This is the bridge between the physical and the digital, is that device, that mobile device. And what more do we hear from the field? Forrester, North American Technographics from last year. This is what's happening if I'm not yet in the store, but how do I get into that store? The idea of checking store hours, looking for price. We know, we've heard all about showrooming, okay? We also know about web rooming now, right? The idea of first going to the web to showroom and then go into the physical store. Huge opportunity there when we think about home furnishings. If I'm a Pottery Barn, a room and board, I may start my experience online, but I am sure, especially I just went through a renovation with my wife of my house, I'm gonna sit on that couch before I buy it, that's for sure, especially if it costs me what it does at a place like Pottery Barn, Williams-Sonoma, or room and board, Design Within Reach, etc. And there's a challenge, though. And we talk about this quite often. I talked about this at our Adobe Summit in 2015, that we have a gap, we have what we call a personalization gap. There's a gap between what marketers think they're doing and what consumers are getting. So the expectations of consumers are not being met. So experience is less than 50% satisfaction, both on mobile web and mobile app. Every year, this data is from the Adobe Mobile Consumer Survey. We do that every summer. We'll do another one. This is from the 2015 survey. We also then consider what we call the mobile elite. So mobile elite are those who reach for their phone first when they do anything in life. So they may have a desktop, they may have a laptop, but a mobile elite, no matter what they do or they think of, whether it's booking travel, commerce, media, content, mobile first. So 71% of those heavy mobile users rank their experience as being most important. And the idea of convenience and efficiency continues to come out of the data for us, that this is not about technology for technology's sake. When was the last time you ever saw somebody wearing Google Glass? Been a while, right? Okay? So we can't just have technology for technology's sake, especially in the world of retail and commerce where margins are very thin. So we can't just go out there and put things out there hoping that consumers are going to adapt this technology. Over 67% of the group said if I put these two groups together, that they will at some point in time pull out their phone while they're in a store. And then 58% of those mobile elite are checking in-store features while they're in that physical store. So again, here's that bridge between the physical and the digital. You wanted to see, I saw you were, I think these slides will be available through the portal or through the site afterwards, but thank you. Here's explosion. This was also part of the survey in terms of adoption, launches, finance, of course, retail in North America, huge explosion in the data in terms of the launches. And we're also seeing, when we think about the journey of the customer, we also see that mobile web is very important when you have a non-loyal advocate or someone who has not transacted with your brand, and we then take them through this mobile journey that we go first from mobile web, they become an advocate, and then become a mobile app user. So there's this natural, the idea of customers and retailers thinking that I'm going to spend my money in one space or the other. You have to spend it at both, because depending on who that consumer is, they may only view you as a mobile web or a mobile app engagement. So a little more data, 20% increase. Those, and I'm going to start to move more into what is happening in the physical store. So we've talked about the iBeacons. We know about things like Neiman Marcus and memory mirrors, magic mirrors. Brands that are putting digital in their store are seeing 20% increase in their conversion rate. The ability to have an engaging experience. We work very closely with Canadian Tire Group. They have a brand called Sport Check. They put in hundreds of panels into their stores, double-digit comps in those stores, and not only in the store, but then they draw a radius of 10 miles around the other stores, and those are also having double-digit comps because it's elevating the brand and the experience and the expectation. And retail, the Futurescape talks about the idea that by 2017, the brick-and-mortar retailers that leverage this information will be that much more successful. So we also talk about the challenge of this 90-10 split. But the reality is, do not look only at your commerce sales, because over 50% of commerce is influenced by that digital space. Forrester reports 54%. Deloitte is 50%. That number keeps moving. It's probably going to be 70, 80%, and we do have some brands that report as much as 78% today. 28% of that is coming from the mobile space, and by 2017, 85% of consumers will expect these one-click away transaction, being able to self-service, be able to line bust with my phone so I don't have to wait 5 minutes to check out at the cash wrap. So I'm going to just move into a few examples of some of the brands that we work with. These are not all Adobe installations, but in some way, shape, or form, they're working with us. And then again, we think about the idea of the store associate. That role is evolving. It's changing. Mobile is the new trusted advisor, and convenience and efficiency is what consumers are looking for. Forrester, beginning of the month, in beginning of March, put out their in-store digital survey. The number one reason why a consumer will engage with technology in a physical store is to save time. That's the one thing they want. Yes, exciting, engaging, all of that is important. But when you think about, as entrepreneurs, what is that next great thing that's going to change or transform retail? It is going to be, how do I make a consumer that much more efficient? We're time-starved, we're busy, and we need to be able to make that experience that much more seamless and efficient and intuitive. So Macys done a lot of things out there. I think they have a pretty good in-store image recognition search to be able to then use a QR type code, understand that product, and then from that product get further or deeper product information. As I mentioned, we're doing a lot of work with Neiman Marcus. They've actually taken an interesting solution, and it's also an interesting ploy to get customer information. So if you run into a Neiman Marcus and you're running low on battery, you can pop your phone into this little device. They'll ask you for your phone number, which now means they can SMS text you. And while you're shopping, spending lots and lots of money at Neiman Marcus, they will charge your phone at the same time. The year before, in 2014, Neiman Marcus launched image recognition search. They were one of the first. Actually, them and Amazon launched this in 2014. Amazon's was pitiful, frankly. Neiman Marcus's was much better. They've actually, at first, this was only in the women's department. So what this is imagine your wife, your girlfriend, your partner is at a dinner party. They all loved each other's handbags and shoes. I can take a photo of that shoe, and I can then go to Neiman Marcus, and I can image recognize and search for that shoe, and it's pretty darn good. They've now expanded it to their full offering so that this also works for both men and women's departments. But again, think about you may be coveting that bag or that suit or whatever that is of your friend or guest at a party. You now don't even have to ask. If you can just snap a picture, boom, you can find that product. Starbucks, the first in the mobile space, 2013, they own 90% of mobile payment. Now they're NFC, they pull me into the store, they know where I am. They certainly have nailed mobile. They actually own their own mobile payment system at the time. GameStop, using RFID and GPS for interactive information on the phone. So as I get closer to the merchandise, I get closer to the shelf, the iBeacon that's being put out there by ShelfBucks, which is their partner, now allows me to understand which game I'm in front of, push me offers, video, whatever it may be, to promote that particular game that I'm standing in front of. I think the CPG space is a very interesting space. Grocery is going to explode more with Amazon Fresh coming into the marketplace, and grocery stores will need to adopt digital more than they have today. But CPG, they're also continuing to adopt the ability to connect with consumer. This is Blipbar. I was at a restaurant, back of the Heinz ketchup bottle. I can scan this, I get recipes. I now have a connection to the brand. Has anyone eaten at an Eatsa yet? There's 2 in San Francisco and there's 1 in Los Angeles. If you have not, I just went there this week. I had already handed my slides in, so I couldn't put it in here. But check this out, EATSA. There are no human beings in that store. You order your food from an iPad in the store, and the food comes out through a door that is a screen. And please, go check this out, Eatsa. Interesting concept, 2 in San Francisco, 1 in Los Angeles. And then last but not least is the stuff we're doing with REI. I talk about the bridging of the physical and the digital, what we're doing to help that store associate become more important, how that role is evolving. So the idea of a store associate being armed is going to become more and more important, especially when we think about high-touch retail and REI, a Williams-Sonoma, a Louis Vuitton, any of these high-touch brands, Neiman Marcus. So those store associates are becoming more enabled with visual merchandising, product information, customer relationship management information, knowing all of your points and all of your scores for your loyalty. So many of you, I'm sure, heard Shantanu Narayan, our CEO, yesterday morning in the keynote. We certainly believe when we think about the retail space, the mobile space, experiences will matter more. These will be the differentiators, especially, I grew up in retail. The first lesson I ever learned was there's always somebody else willing to make less money than you when you wake up in the morning. There can only be one low price, only one low price. What space do you want to live in, okay? This is what makes up a great experience. Compelling, personal, useful. I've talked a lot about useful, efficient, and it needs to be where I am, where I want to be, and everywhere. So this is my first TiEcon. It's been a pleasure being here. I got to run. I've got a wedding to go to, not mine, a friend of mine. But I appreciate you all staying through lunch, and Have a great afternoon.